Russia. With that, I would now be honored to ask Vice President Joe Biden to come to the podium and address an audience. Mr. Vice President.
Thank you all so very much. Thank you, Andy, and Rector, thank you. It's an honor to be here at Moscow State University, and I want to thank the AmCham Chamber for sponsoring this. To the students that are here, I apologize. In America, we have a rule. You don't have to wait any longer than 20 minutes for a full professor. And for someone who's not a full professor, you need only wait 10 minutes. I'm honored you waited at all. I do apologize to the business community as well as the students for keeping you waiting. I want to publicly as well thank President Medvedev and Prime Minister Putin for their hospitalities. We had very good meetings, very long meetings, and I hope productive. And I want to thank AmCham Russia for sponsoring this event and for working to foster a modern business climate after the fall of communism. And Rector, again, thank you for hosting us here at Moscow State University, and which has given Russia and the world so many and such an extraordinary array of graduates. Among them, 8, if I'm not mistaken, 8 Nobel laureates, including former President Gorbachev, who I've known for some time. In addition to my wife, Jill, I brought along my granddaughter. Her name is my number 2 granddaughter. Her name is Finnegan Biden. And I brought her along to Russia because I wanted her to see this great country with her own eyes. A country of Pushkin's poetry and Tolstoy's prose, a country of Tchaikovsky's compositions and Zhukov and Gagarin's heroic feats. It is a rich and noble culture, and I'm delighted she's had a chance to get just a little glimpse of it. Let me also thank our Ambassador John Byerly and his team for hosting me. As you business people know, there's an old expression if you're in the military, but also it means if you're in diplomatic corps. The good news is the commanding general is coming. The bad news is the commanding general is coming. On the diplomatic side, the good news, the vice president's coming. The bad news, the vice president's coming, because they've created an extraordinary amount of work for John's incredible team. But John is one of the best America has to offer. And anyone who doubts the ability of Americans and Russians to work together need only examine the history of John's family. His father, Joseph, was a hero in both Russia and the United States. An American soldier taken prison by the Nazis who went on later, when he escaped, to fight with the Red Army on the Eastern Front. And now, more than 65 years later, his son is the American envoy to Moscow. I think that's a remarkable, remarkable story. And today I also want to address, and the main reason I'm here, is the state of U.S.-Russian relations. I don't need to tell anyone in this audience that our administration, when we took office in January of '09, our relationship with Russia had hit a fairly low point. It had accumulated over the previous 8 years. Yes, we saw a war between Russia and Georgia played out and played a role in that decline. But even before that conflict erupted in August of '08, a dangerous drift was underway in this important relationship. While we no longer considered each other enemies, we couldn't always tell from the rhetoric that was flying back and forth across the continent. Ironically, this came at a time when American and Russian interests on nuclear arms control, non-proliferation, stabilizing Afghanistan, fighting terrorism, opening global markets, and a range of other issues. At a time when all of them, we were more closely aligned than ever on each and every one of those issues. So to seize this opportunity President Obama and I proposed forging a fresh new start by, as I said in the initial speech on our foreign policy, by pressing a restart button, reset button. We wanted to literally reset this relationship, reset it in a way that reflected our mutual interest so that our countries could move forward together. The President asked me to make that reset the focus of our administration's first foreign policy speech, what I delivered several weeks after our inauguration at the Munich Security Conference. And I said then, and I quote, "The United States and Russia can disagree and still work together where our interests coincide, and they coincide in many places." Now, we know that pursuing this agenda, we knew this pursuing this agenda would be hard work. That old habits, as we say in America, old habits die hard. That's why President Obama has met nearly a dozen times with President Medvedev, and why together we established a bilateral presidential commission with working groups on key issues like arms control and energy, broadening contacts between our two governments. And in spite of what we call in the spirit of what we call in America a dual-track engagement, we've also worked to deepen our ties between our country's business leaders, including many of the distinguished men and women in this room, as well as between our civil society groups. Excuse me. Our business and civil society summits, alongside our presidential summits in 2009 and 2010, were, in my view, very important in strengthening these relationships. We believed then and still believe in focusing on concrete outcomes that serve both countries' interest. As President Obama puts it, win-win situations. And we reject, the President and I, the tired theory that our values and our interest must compete for influence over our politics. We flat reject that notion because we believe, and we will continue to, stand up for our principles. And I believe those principles make all of us, Americans and Russians alike, more secure, more prosperous, and more free. 2 years since we pressed that reset button, I would argue the benefits of this approach to both our countries are absolutely clear on issue after issue. Arms control. We signed and ratified a New START treaty, which will reduce our deployment of strategic weapons while ensuring that we maintain stable and predictable verification. Two countries with the largest nuclear arsenals showed the world that they are serious about arms control and strengthening global non-proliferation. And that gave us even more credibility to deal with the most egregious violators of their international commitments. Iran. With our partners in the so-called P5+1, we, Russia and the United States, gave Tehran a chance for meaningful dialogue based on mutual interest and mutual respect to develop peaceful nuclear means. They simply rejected it. So Russia and the United States, along with our partners on the UN Security Council, adopted what is known as Resolution 1929, the most extensive package of sanctions Iran has ever faced. And Moscow, on its own and to its own, costing it in dollars and rubles, Moscow took another important step. It canceled its contract to sell to Iran S-300 air defense missile systems, which was an unambiguous sign of international resolve that Iran must address the concerns that we have over their nuclear program. North Korea, working closely with Russia and our other international partners on the threat posed by Pyongyang, we adopted another UN resolution referred to as 1874, which authorized inspections, almost unprecedented, authorized inspections of vessels, Korean vessels, suspected of carrying nuclear materials into or out of their country. And the nations of the world have cooperated. I would argue it's because Russia and the United States were leading in this effort. Afghanistan, we're cooperating on what we call the Northern Distribution Network, which now brings vital supplies to the ISAF, the International Security Forces, including American soldiers and civilians, into Afghanistan. In addition to rail cars rolling through Russia with supplies, over 800 flights have carried nearly 120,000 passengers over Russian territory to Afghanistan. It would have been thought impossible 4 years ago. And Russia is also providing badly needed military equipment and training to the Afghan National Security Forces. We're also cooperating on drug eradication. European security. Using America's improved relationship with Russia as a model, we also reset relations between Russia and NATO during last year's Lisbon summit. And a great deal of credit goes to President Medvedev. And we identified missile defense as a common project. I've talked extensively with your leaders on this issue. It will be difficult, but it will be a game changer if we can get it done. It will say to the world, the two largest superpowers in the world are mutually developing the ability to have missile defenses, which I would argue will have an extremely important impact on dissuading so many of the countries who are contemplating becoming nuclear powers from doing so. This year, we'll seek an agreement on an ambitious work plan for cooperation on this once contentious issue. And we'll also pursue an agreement on negotiations to modernize and strengthen Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty. I've been around a long time. The CFE Treaty has been something we've been working on since the late 70s. We have an opportunity to make more progress. Central Asia. We're working together to foster a stable democratic government. A stable democratic government, and I might add, a great deal of the credit goes to your president, in Kyrgyzstan. Combating drug traffickers, eradicating polio, steps that suggest we can move beyond the so-called grand game and spheres of influence, a Cold War relic, in my view. Cooperation in each of these important issues has made America more secure, and I would argue, presumptuous of me, but I believe it's made Russia more secure. But the reset also has produced more subtle signs of progress. Again, ones that would not have been contemplated even 4 years ago. Russian helicopters used for relief efforts in Sudan. California firefighters helping fight wildfires in central Russia. American and Russian drug officers working side by side in Afghanistan, the world's largest producer of heroin and opium as a consequence of it. Student body presidents from American universities discussing democracy and human rights with Kremlin advisors, and we're very pleased that some of you are here today in the audience. These things clearly would have been hard to imagine amid the mistrust and ill will a little over 2 years ago. And to some of you, they may sound small.